You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYBC.
WCYTV
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WYBC. Quite a bit to tackle and not a lot of time, including an update out of the North Atlantic. The United States Coast Guard has pursued a vessel for over 2 weeks. This is a Guyana-flagged, Iranian-linked, and therefore sanctioned crude oil tanker known as the Bella 1. It has now changed its name and its nation of flag to the Russian-flagged Maduro as it approaches Ireland in the North Atlantic. That is according to 2 U.S. officials with knowledge of plans for the U.S. Coast Guard to finally seize the vessel and telling CBS News. 2 U.S. intelligence officials stated that former Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and other officials had previously discussed placing armed military personnel on oil tankers leaving Venezuela and disguising them as civilians for defense purposes. That is illegal. That violates the Geneva Convention in every single way known to man, as well as deploying portable Soviet-era defense systems onto the ships. And as we know, Soviet-era defense weaponry, what's the right word for this? Sucks. It absolutely sucks. Now, putting that story aside, another story that we'll get into involves the Swiss federal government releasing all of the assets of Nicolas Maduro. Shocker, Swiss holding a lot of evil people's money and resources. We'll get to that in a second because there is an individual who was arrested for the attempted break-in with a hammer of Vice President J.D. Vance's Ohio home with a hammer. We have a picture of what the individual looks like, quite the looker. According to the Post-Millennial, Andy No's crew kind of keeping an eye on this stuff, William DeFore, that's the name that they're going by, the man arrested for smashing several windows at Vice President J.D. Vance's home in Cincinnati, Ohio, is a transgender identified male who goes by the name of Julia DeFore. So this comes after DeFore was identified as the suspect in the incident early on Monday morning. He identifies as transgender. His father, a surgeon's Democrat donor. There are some other suspicious things, here, there, and everywhere. All that we can confirm right now is that the individual has been arrested. Again, Vice President Vance was not home at the time. He released a statement this morning saying, "I appreciate everyone's well wishes about the attack on our home. As far as I can tell, a crazy person tried to break in by hammering the windows. I'm grateful to the Secret Service and the Cincinnati police for responding quickly. We weren't even home as we had returned already to Washington, D.C." He then issued a request to media asking, don't really share a lot of pictures of the home. Please don't share any pictures. We're trying to keep our kids away from, again, the fear of someone attacking your home and seeing pictures of that in different places, which absolutely can be respected. Vice President J.D. Vance is the latest of an individuals who have been targeted by left-wing extremist transgender terrorism. That is what it is. The fact that it was not successful has nothing to do with the nature of the crime. It is still just as evil to attempt a crime as to succeed with a crime. And the amount of radical insanity that has people marching around in major cities cheering for the release, demanding the release of an actual dictator who sent vehicles to plow through women and children. Individuals who set buildings on fire because the owner voted a different way than they would have preferred. Not for some radical fringe party, which still wouldn't matter, but just for voting Republican. Buildings being torched. And now another act of transgender terrorism. For the comments who are asking, this dude went by she, her pronouns. If to answer your question, not that that's anything particularly special. Now on to some of the bigger news. Everything has changed from the last time we were doing the Tony Kinnett Cast, that being Friday, to now. Everything has changed. Things are in maximum overdrive. The stock market is in maximum overdrive.
Stocks soaring today following the arrest and capture of Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro. The Dow jumping 600 points, an intraday all-time high, a record closing high. It looks like just shy of 49,000.
That's a big deal. It's a big deal because the United States is, again, monopolizing its own hemispheres. The United States was built to dominate. It was built to dominate physically, economically, and socially. That is what the ideals of the United States do. They naturally move forward. And when you constrain those, the country dies. And instead, what we have seen out of this administration is a simple allowance to let America succeed. And therefore, the markets and people around the world are reacting accordingly. Now, on the other side, the Democrats are completely melting down. Again, not necessarily a big surprise. You have some of the more unhinged, stupid rants like Chris Murphy from my least favorite state, Connecticut, who thinks he's going to be president or something.
Venezuela is not a security threat to the United States. They're
not true.
Not threatening to invade us. There is
not what in Venezuela had military action taken against it for.
There's no terrorist group like Al-Qaeda operating there that has plans to attack the United States.
Hezbollah and Al-Qaeda have previously operated inside of Venezuela. The country provided them safe harbor to train. It manufactured suicide drones for Hezbollah and for Al-Qaeda. And do you know how? Well, we're going to talk to the expert on Latin American affairs on that here in just a moment.
To the extent that you care about the drug trade, yes, they produce drugs, but those drugs go to Europe.
No.
Fentanyl is the drug that's killing Americans. That's not coming from Venezuela. Venezuela produces cocaine. 90% of it is not coming to the United States.
So you have Democrats that are running around essentially trying to say Venezuela doesn't produce fentanyl, therefore we should have left Maduro alone. Now that's a very stupid argument for a number of reasons, part of which because Venezuela acts as Russia and China's outpost in South America. It is where China stores the precursor chemicals that are then loaded onto boats and then sent north through the southern Caribbean and up into the Gulf of America while making stops at various islands along the way. Lest we forget the number of highly explosive boats that blew up a little bit more excitedly than carrying a couple of walleye and a bluegill. So Chris Murphy is losing it. Of course, then we have Chuckles Schumer, who's trying desperately to pull his approval rating out of 0% by claiming that this somehow put all of American service members at great, terrible risk.
Senator, thank you for joining us this morning. Let me just start out. Do you think it's a good thing that Maduro has been removed from office?
Look, Maduro is a horrible, horrible person. But you don't treat lawlessness with other lawlessness. And that's what's happened here. The American people this morning, George, are scratching their heads in wonderment and in fear.
No, they're not. Now, he complained, Hakeem Jeffries complained. We're not going to spend too much time watching the various amounts of complaints, but what Hakeem Jeffries is saying is rather useful because he's trying to make this case that, well, they said it was about drugs, and actually, it's about oil.
And the notion that the American people are supposed to believe that the military action that the Trump administration took had anything really to do with a counter-narcotics effort is belied by the fact that it was Donald Trump just a few weeks ago who pardoned the former president of Honduras.
Okay, so they're going to try to make this big statement that, well, it's actually not about the drugs. Unlike what Trump is saying, it's really about the oil. There are two problems outside of the fact that Hakeem Jeffries sounds like William Shatner and Barack Obama had an awkward love child. The Hakeem Jeffries statement, the Democrat talking point, which was a talking point for all of about 15 minutes, they are quite literally, the DNC had about 14 different emails go out in various internal departments today that all said completely different lines of communication. They have no idea what to do with this because it was that successful of an operation. But as far as the Hakeem Jeffries line is concerned, he's saying that Trump didn't go after Venezuela because of drugs. And that's true. And do you know who has made it very clear that we did not go after Maduro just in order to topple his regime just because of narco trafficking, just because of that? The entire Trump administration, Donald Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Secretary of State Marco Rubio again, and then a third and a fourth time. And then, of course, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, General Kane, and on ad nauseum. So we're going to get into a little of the details on how and why, because again, I know it's Monday. You've probably heard the details, but you haven't heard the details to this level of detail. So we're going to send the radio crew to commercial and continue on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Now, let's talk about the Venezuelan operation. Without a doubt, it is the most incredible military operation in recent history. It is incredible. Operation Absolute Resolve involved several brilliant, highly coordinated military units without any leaking, because it was not given to the armed services committees, nor was it provided in the way that previous Pentagon press access had allowed a lot of various news agencies to leak things and put American troops at risk. You had Special Forces Operation Detachment Delta, that's Delta Force, the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the famous Night Stalkers. You had Joint Task Force Southern Spear and its brass taking the lead on coordinating these efforts. Of course, Air Force, Naval, and Marine Corps air units, and U.S. Cyber Command, Space Command, the FBI, the DEA, a huge amount of naval support, and a couple of prime military defense contractors together, shutting off all of the lights in Caracas. We in the United States have been getting hit by Chinese and Russian cyber attacks for years. We shut off the lights in Caracas. And then the United States went into Venezuela and blew up an airport. And amidst that chaos of blowing up an airport, and also the tomb of the nasty, horrible, disgusting piece of human debris and dictator Hugo Chavez, which is just, I mean, incredible. We're able to capture Nicolas Maduro in what is about 6 minutes. About 6 minutes. The entire operation took less than 20. He was bagged, grabbed his wife. They've had blinders thrown on them, and they were, boom, out of the country. Not a single American casualty. Incredible. It's an incredible operation. Here it was the President of the United States, of course, talking to Fox right after the operation had concluded. I do love having a president who is in awe at the total strength, power, resolve, and professionalism of the United States military.
I've never seen anything like this. I was able to watch it in real time, and I watched every aspect of it, and I listened to the communication between, where we were in Florida and out in the field in Venezuela. And it was amazing to see the professionalism, the quality of leadership, the professionalism. General Raising Cane is fantastic.
He, again, praises the United States military because they should be praised. This is an incredible operation. The pride that every American should feel at the Macarena being played at a slightly lower speed, reminiscent of the Gulf War, in which the United States looked at Saddam Hussein and said, what if we erase your entire Air Force and all of the Soviet armor that you've imported that were supposed to terrify Americans, and all of your Baghdadi air defense, which is also supposed to be top of the line, beating any U.S. forces, Soviet air defense, and we wiped it all away. I made this joke in kind of a rant, a Sunday show rant that I did yesterday, just because. And for those who were wondering, this is what I'm talking about, the clip, the U.S. military, the slow Macarena theme, bringing back the theme of U.S. dominance in the military. I love it. I do. It's fantastic. And there are a number of people on the left and a few on the right, sort of, who are very, very upset over this. They're very mad. How could he do violating international law? How could Trump? How could you order this arrest of this innocent man? And you have the libertarians going, oh, it's going to be Iraq and Afghanistan again. Those out there who, again, we'll talk about in a moment, believe that anyone who suggests that the United States should be a dominant power on the world stage is a neocon. Those individuals can absolutely suck eggs. Because the United States removing threats at the source. You remove the dictator, there's nothing for Venezuelan migrants to run from. You remove the problem, you remove the threat. That doesn't mean occupying and nation building. And you get something out of it that does help things here at home. But I want to save some of those questions for the guest that we've got up next, because if we're going to talk about this, we're going to talk about it right. We're going to talk about it with an expert. And we're just going to hop right into those particular questions. So we got to pick up the radio crew from commercial. When we come back, we're going to dive in real quick and then come back out and talk about Tim Walz, facing possible federal indictment. It's 2026, boys and girls. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Let's get into some of what this actually means for the rest of the country here in these United States and abroad. So you're going to need someone a little bit more learned on this than I am. I know, very, very hard to believe. So we're going to bring on the one and the only Andreas Martinez-Fernandez. He's the senior policy analyst for Latin America at the Heritage Foundation. So he reads this stuff all the time in English and in Spanish. Andreas, busy weekend, huh?
Definitely quite an eventful start of the year.
So let's get right into it. Not futz around anymore. There's been the quibbling, the complaining from some isolated parts of the country that what does this have to do with America first? Take it.
Well, I think it has everything to do with America first, and that's protecting the American people from live, active, and deadly threats in our own hemisphere. People like to say that this is just like, nation building in the Middle East and all the mistakes that we've made in the past with our foreign policy.
Right. Anyone I don't like is a neocon, and other stories to tell yourself.
Right, exactly. But you know what? The reality is that the Venezuelan narco threat and the narco threats within our own hemisphere, which are by far the most dramatic and deadly for the American people,
right.
We're talking about 100,000 overdose deaths a year from narcotics alone, and that's not even getting into the weaponization of migration and instability that the American people and American cities have lived with for years. All of this has really been ignored by the Washington establishment for decades. You've never really seen a serious attention as far as the foreign policy priorities of the United States to these issues until President Trump decided that he's going to break with that really what's a noxious practice of ignoring these core security threats to the United States. And again, this is what affects Middle America far more than what happens in parts of the Middle East, in Europe. This is our hemisphere. This is where we live, and ignoring that in prioritization of issues that some of the establishment prefers to focus on has had deadly consequences for the American people.
There's definitely no denying that. I do want to ask, of course, we could talk about the ladies on The View and their opposition to this. Oh, it's piracy. Oh, it's kidnapping. But we are adults in the room. We'll let the toddlers run off and yell at each other. So in all seriousness, there was a lot of Russia outposting, a lot of Xi Jinping's China outposting in Venezuela. This was a launching point for a lot of the precursor chemicals that we saw going sky high and a lot of those beautiful MQ-9 and naval strikes happening on those narco boats, something that I just can't stop watching. It's too enjoyable to watch narco and human traffickers going sky high. But with that particular foreign intervention in the region, China and Russia, they got out the sabers and they started shaking them. We're talking shaking them like skeletons at a spirit Halloween. So what in the world does this actually mean for us? Are we actually going to see any intervention at all or any diplomatic snub-nosing that's going to be worth anything? Or is the UN going to yell for 30 seconds and it be over?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of posturing that we're seeing and going to continue to see from entities like the UN and certainly our adversaries, which have in Russia and China, Iran, used Venezuela as an outpost in our hemisphere to undermine our interests and undermine our security. So they're very upset to lose that outpost, which I think they're very much on the way to doing. Nicolas Maduro had opened up not only his oil industry and essentially handed that over to Havana, China, Russia, and Iran, but he's also opened up Venezuela's national territory, which again, the distance between Venezuela and the U.S. mainland is equivalent to the distance between New York and Texas. This is right in our neighborhood, and there's nothing between us except for open waters. So that's left us vulnerable, and it means we need to address that, particularly when hostile foreign powers like China and Russia are operating there.
One of the benefits about actually talking to someone who studies these things in detail up close rather than just your broad 30,000 foot influencer You can tell me when someone says arms manufacturing for foreign terrorist organizations or foreign powers happen in Venezuela, what kind of things was Venezuela putting together? Not just, crude oil and jerry cans, because obviously they couldn't refine it. What kind of weapons was Venezuela participating in manufacturing?
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of weapons that were transferred, certainly to the narco trafficking groups in our hemisphere. Venezuela and the Venezuelan regime made itself a proactive partner of these groups. And as a result, saw a significant amount of Venezuelan military weaponry making its way into their hands. And they used that to ensure that they could produce and traffic drugs to the United States and elsewhere. So that was, again, a key aspect of that relationship. And it's not just the weapons. There was actually, public resources, including institutions like the public oil utility, even state-owned aircraft that were used in furtherance of narco trafficking activity. So it's been a broad cooperation that you saw there. And then
they did manufacturing suicide drones and Hezbollah equipment, didn't they? Or there was Colombia.
There was quite a bit of partnership, particularly with Iran, on the development of that capacity. And a lot of this was focused on, much of this was really looking at trying to pretend that Venezuela's regime is still powerful enough to hold off the United States military, which it absolutely wasn't, as we saw proven. This was a regime that it's not even a paper tiger. It just folded immediately when faced with the strength of the U.S. military. And that's, that calls the bluff of what the Venezuelan regime has been doing for years, which is saying that they can thumb their nose and attack and undermine the United States and stability in our region. And we can't do anything about it because they're so powerful. That's just not the case.
Sure. I mean, obviously, when you have, the Cuban Praetorian Guard who's walking you around and you have Chinese officials caught in the crossfire, I mean, it's pathetic. I've seen subprime military contracting agencies on their last leg that were better suited than these goofballs. But that's not a fair comparison. Maybe the French. I've seen better French troops than what's been going on there. No, in all seriousness, one of the core issues on a lot of Americans' minds is how much this is going to cost the American over a period of time. Obviously, there are some who aren't serious, who are suggesting this is going to cause a second migration wave to the United States, which I don't necessarily see that. Maybe they're seeing something that I'm not. But a lot of people also have the concern that we're now going to be giving a bunch of aid to propping up a new regime in Venezuela. What does the future look like, as much as you can gaze into your crystal ball of studies here? What are we seeing in the next couple of months that we should be keeping an eye out for?
Yeah, no, I definitely don't think that that's going to be the case as far as a massive bill to the American taxpayer for reconstructing Venezuela. First of all, it's important to note that right now we don't have anything like an occupying force in Venezuela. What we have done is very specifically targeted the ringleader of a transnational narco-terrorist group, which was Nicolas Maduro, and taking him off the table. And now we can use the pressure tools that we have, including sanctions, including the threat of further action, and political pressure, to make sure that the remnants of that regime don't fall back into that practice of undermining U.S. national security, and that instead they halt narco trafficking, that they halt hosting the most dangerous adversaries of the United States with a base in our hemisphere. And that they go on a path to a transition, which is going to also restore stability and democracy in Venezuela. We can do those things through lower cost tools than we saw in Iraq. And I think a lot of that is external pressure. But there's also a lot of resources that can be brought to bear that don't have to come directly from the American taxpayer. First of all, Venezuela is the country with the largest oil reserves in the world. Venezuela hasn't been able to tap into that because this regime, socialist regime, is so incompetent and corrupt that they haven't been able to even maintain an operating oil industry. So limited investments there can help finance that.
I'm sorry, I missed it. This reminds me of Zimbabwe. This is just the nations that take over for whether it's social revolution or whether it's a racial revolution or some type of populist uprising that leans socialisty. It immediately realizes, man, driving all of the talent out of the country and stealing all of their stuff is really bad. Jim, do you know what in the world this machine needs to work? You don't either? Well, shoot. I mean, it's really tragic, but at the same time, again, I'm glad that the presidential administration's not making any bones about how this is going to benefit Americans. Just pause here for a second. Andres Martinez-Fernandez, he's the Heritage Foundation's senior policy analyst for Latin America. We're bumping up on the FCC clock, so here's what we're going to do. Radio crew, we're going to send you to commercial, and the rest of y'all should catch the rest of this interview over on the Daily Signal's YouTube. It's going to be excellent stuff. I've got a couple of little spicier questions to ask him, but of course, that's Andreas Bread and Butter. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Now, in the meantime here, and by the way, we will get that rest of that interview uploaded here in just a bit. We got too much news to stick on that right at the moment because Minnesota Governor Tim Walz is just one of the local fraud and corruption concerns here in the United States that people do want a lot of attention put on the United States. Because yes, foreign policy stuff is great, but what kind of stuff is being done here at home? And one of those things that Americans are very concerned with are the number of individuals who have migrated to this country, who have come to this country and have made lives, even though they have not followed the proper procedure to immigrate to the United States. Here is how one individual put it, that if all of this works and the Trump administration is correct here, Venezuelans say they'll go back to their own country.
These people from Venezuela, many of them have told me if this really works, we will go back to our country. We want to really rebuild our country and our nation after 26 years. We're all waiting for this moment. We were praying for this moment that something will happen in their countries sooner or later because we have seen their struggles. They left their family. Their dreams were shattered.
That's true. In 1970s, after the nationalization that ripped away from U.S. oil companies, yes, real Americans with real American jobs who had their assets stolen by the Venezuelans, and then through the reign of Hugo Chavez, then through the reign of Maduro, the insanity that persisted, and Americans are just expected to take it on the chin because, well, I mean, you know, come on, is disgusting. It is truly, deeply disgusting. Since the turn of the century, Americans have just been expected to just give anything and everything up to the rest of the world, hand over fist. Bill Clinton effectuated and nailed down that policy, and it tried as he could, while he wasn't fooling around with Monica Lewinsky, to etch that foreign policy in cement. One of the things that led to the 9/11. So, to the 9/11 terror attacks. So, that aside, the President of the United States is in the mood to get something done. And this would be regarding crime in American cities and a possible invoking here in the next couple of weeks of the Insurrection Act. We've got to bring the radio crew back. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back, radio crew. Joining us back on the live stream to the Tony Kinnett Cast. Here on the Tony Kinnett Cast, we've got a lot to chat about. Mainly, the President of the United States appears to be rolling into 2026 with as much momentum as he can muster. Here's the President saying that, maybe the Insurrection Act is finally ready to go. Maybe we're done with this nonsense. Here's the President.
You know that Portland, we got it down to almost no crime. Do you know that? But we pulled it out. We had a Supreme Court decision. We can go back. We're allowed to go back in. But we'll go back in when the crime starts. Look, the crime will soon start because they now know that we're out. And at the appropriate time, we'll go back in, and we may, if we're allowed to. The most powerful thing we haven't used, the Insurrection Act.
you're considering using the insurrection?
I've always considered it, but we haven't needed it anywhere. 48% of the presidents of this country have used it. Bush used it, I think, 22 times or something. You know that, right? I mean, Bush the elder.
Now, when we get to the actual United States homeland, we are reaching a point where there are individuals, both in the private and the public community, who are directly impeding federal forces. And this is going to cause a couple of problems that might require the Insurrection Act to solve. That's a very serious thing. So among these are localities that are trying to impede federal authorities like Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement from coming into communities and simply upholding federal law. For the 846th time, if you do not like federal immigration law, you can send these individuals called representatives and senators to the House of Representatives and to the chamber of the United States Senate, and then they can pass this thing called a law that would then forbid the feds from upholding immigration law. You can change immigration law, but as long as federal immigration law says what it says, localities do not have the authority to impede federal forces. And all of these organizations that are trying to stand in solidarity against the feds, like Hilton, for example, news coming today that the Everpeak Hilton Minneapolis hotel operators have been canceling the reservations and rooms of Immigration Customs Enforcement agents and other federal law enforcement. They're just kicking the feds out of hotels. Now, I remember under the Biden administration when FEMA was kicking survivors of the Maui wildfires out of places like the Grand Wailea, the most expensive hotel on Maui. But now here we are. You have individuals that are, again, receiving some subsidization in the state of Minnesota. A lot of the hotel industry in Minnesota is paid for by housing migrants via the state of Minnesota and the federal government. Now, some of these hotels are turning around, and at least according to right now, Hilton says that they've been in touch with the independent ownership of the hotel. They're apologizing for the actions. They're taking immediate actions to rectify the situation. It is pure chaos, and that's not even the most chaotic thing that is currently going on in Minnesota today. Democrat governor of Minnesota, who is up for re-election, or was, Tim Walz, who presided over what is now the largest systemic case of fraud in our nation's history of any governor, bar none, not even close. Governor Tim Walz has announced he's no longer running for re-election. And I got to tell you, with just less than a year to go, it's rather late to be making this kind of a dropout. But he's trying to pass it out. He says, like many Minnesotans, I was glad to turn the page on 2025. And then he pointed out that the real problem with Minnesota and why he can't continue to be governor into another term, which is what he wanted to do, the real issue is not that the groups he invited into Minnesota and then defended, and anyone who questioned those cultural communities, who brought in with them their cultural norms from places that honor fraud and theft and murder, etc. He called anyone who questioned that a white supremacist. That's not the issue. He says the real issue is that Donald Trump is going to make Minnesota cold and frigid and mean and stinky.
I don't want to mince words here. Donald Trump and his allies in Washington and in St. Paul and online want to make our state a colder, meaner place.
Now, I really love this because, first of all, he is whining about cyberbullying in his announcement that he's not going to run for re-election. I love this. These people online, they were really mean. It hurts.
Stop! He's already dead.
But he had more to say.
They want to poison our people against each other by attacking our neighbors. And ultimately, they want to take away much of what makes Minnesota the best place in the country to raise a family.
Such as?
They've already begun trying to withhold funds that were meant to help families afford child care.
But why? But why, Tim? Why were those funds withheld from Minnesota? You had the opportunity. At the beginning of the Trump administration, they came forward, they said, whether it's in Elon Musk's stilted South African, now more Americanized accent, whether it was in the tones of Harmeet Dillon or Pam Bondi or President Trump or Vice President J.D. Vance or Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent or Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt, you were told, just give us the receipts. Show us how you're using the money. Show us you are taking federal funds for SNAP, for the Head Start program, for migrant resettlement funds. How are you using them, Tim Walz? And he refused. And so now, after it has been discovered all of this fraud and more fraud and pride over said fraud. Now the Trump administration says, no, you're not getting any more money. You can't even prove to us where the money we gave you went. How about no? I would love to see people whose universities reach out to them for donations, ask them, how did you spend the tuition I gave you? Same kind of a situation here.
And they have no intention of stopping there. Make no mistake, we should be concerned about fraud in our state government.
So what he did, since he's so concerned about fraud in Minnesota's state government, is he silenced and went after the nonpartisan auditor for the Minnesota state legislature for 10 years before Nick Shirley went around and shoved cameras in the faces of those in different daycares under suspicion of all kinds of fraud. State agencies, federal agencies, state outlets, local outlets, media outlets on the left and the right had made it very clear how much fraud was rampant in Minnesota. And Tim Walz, who was one heartbeat away, if the election had gone slightly differently in 24, he was one heartbeat away from being the president of the United States. He is easily the most corrupt governor since Huey Long. It is not even close. It is not even a question.
We cannot effectively deliver programs and services if we can't earn the public's trust. That's why over the past few years, we've made systemic changes in the way we do business.
Yes, by just throwing more money at it. He just signed into law on New Year's Day. It went into effect. He signed into law late last year another paid family leave program where you write to Minnesota and say, give me money, not your money, give me your money. And then Tim Walz would give you up to $1,400 a week. That's just bonkos wilderness insane. He's like, man, I can't believe there's all of this fraud everywhere. Wow, this is just crazy. I mean, now some of the left-wing pundits are showing just a small moment of self-reflection, not because of this, but because Tim Walz is looking at very likely indictment here. Now, look, we all know the whole strangely worded letter. Nancy Mace of the Carolinas is getting ready to roast him over an open fire in a congressional hearing. You know, we'll share the clips of it on the show. You know, we'll have people cheer. It'll be wonderful. Play the boxing ring sound, whoop-de-doo. But what actually matters is the indictments. And we are coming up on the point. I talked to two individuals inside the Department of Justice today, one of them inside the financial fraud investigations team. And they made it clear they are absolutely looking through every single record associated with Tim Walz. They are looking at all associated reports over the last 15 years regarding Tim Walz. Because it turns out a guy who lied about his military service and a host of other things when he was running for office probably lied about financial things. So what are some of the things that Tim Walz could face on federal level charges? Conspiracy to defraud the United States, because if he is covering for fraud that took advantage of federal dollars, that's 18 U.S. Code Section 371. Conspiracy to defraud the United States. That is for allegedly allowing or failing to stop schemes that misused federal funds. If we can find Tim Walz just looking the other way, that is an instant violation of that code. There's, of course, the wire fraud and mail fraud. There's money laundering. Much less likely, no one should be suggesting this is RICO, the racketeering charges. Charging someone with RICO is dumb. It's how you get Diddy off of charges that should have put him away for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Because you say, oh, he can't just have been diddling children. It had to be a super enterprisey business network. Tim Walz is not in the background actually going around and playing evil Somalian Mr. Monopoly. No, don't charge him with RICO. Go with the stuff you got him on. Conspiracy to defraud the United States is good. Bribery or public corruption, that's Section 201. And then, of course, the obstruction of justice. If it can be shown that one of the federal agent groups that was getting ready to head into Minnesota was doing so not just for upholding federal immigration law, but upholding, let's say, looking into potential fraud against the United States, Tim Walz, by ordering state departments not to work with the federal authorities, that would be a violation of the obstruction of justice. And then, of course, there's ignoring whistleblowers, which is also a part of that, due to precedent, I think, set in 2002, the last time that was a really heavy hitter. Don't take my word on that. I'm not sure whether it's 02 or 05. Radio crew, we're going to send you off to the commercial and dig into Zohran Mamdani. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Now, live stream crew, Zohran Mamdani. He's also having a really tough time. He said he was briefed. I've been briefed on Nicolas Maduro being put into prison next to Diddy in the Southern District of New York. I love that so much. I love that Trump put Nicolas Maduro in prison right underneath the rice-eating hands of Zohran Mamdani. Exciting times. Exciting times indeed. Because Zohran said, well, I was briefed. Like very, very official, right? Very impressive. You impress. He was briefed. There's somebody who kicked in the door. Maybe it was Ice-T from Special Victims Unit. And he's like, Mr. Mayor, did you see this report? And actually, no. Zohran Mamdani doesn't have any form of... Well, no. I want to make sure I get that right. Yeah, he has no form in any way, shape, or form of federal security clearance at all. He has none of that. So when he gets up in front of the country and he says, I was briefed, no, he's a liar.
Clearance yet, and has anyone from a federal agency reached out to you or members of your team to begin the vetting to get federal security clearance?
That briefing, yes, was conducted by my team, and the question of federal security clearance is one that's ongoing.
So do you have it? Right.
No.
Okay. Just little fun fact here. Cool tips and tricks for you guys out there. A briefing involves an official from the organization that is directly involved with the operation, giving you details from the inside to your office. As much as I love you guys, none of you can brief me on the Tony Kinnett Cast. You can't. You're not a part of the organization. Producer Daniel can brief me on the Tony Kinnett Cast. I'm sorry. That's not how briefings work. No, but he's only the mayor of the largest and most influential city of the United States. I mean, hey, incredible stuff. Now, in case you've wondered, we've talked a little bit, of course, about how he said he's going to destroy individualism and move towards collectivism, open socialism at hand. Now he's announcing witch trials for landlords. I mean, at least grow the Joseph Stalin mustache in full. Wear the uniform, at least. If you're going to go out there and just openly Trotsky all over the place, I mean, have a little spine. Here you go. Trials for landlords.
Have you ever rented an apartment in New York only to find yourself not just paying rent, but application fees, amenity fees, credit score checks? In a city filled with old buildings that could use some tender loving care, some landlords are taking advantage of the housing market to gouge tenants with outrageous fees.
Okay, so he makes the case right at the beginning. He said, there are buildings in New York City that could use a little TLC. That's true, absolutely. All of the restrictions in New York that he has already on the record said he will keep in place forbid people from updating those buildings. And there is no money left over because of the outrageous fees and taxes in New York City to fix those buildings. And the building codes and regulations won't let people build new, more, let's say, not a decrepit hole style buildings. But anywho, gouging with fees. So we're gonna play the fee game here.
All while leaving them trying to survive in homes with collapsing ceilings and sinking floors. It's time for that to change.
He stands up from the desk. It's time for that to change. I wonder how many takes it took. So he's just like power squatting in his new office.
Citywide crackdown on rental ripoffs. We need to take on the indignities from those land.
What? Who investigated this? Who edited and produced it? What is the leaning on the banister? Oh, hi, I didn't see you there. I'm moron zom the dom dom.
In order to demand more than their fair share. That's why our administration is organizing a series of rental ripoff hearings in every borough.
Now we're going to talk about that because his tenant advisor, whoo boy, we got to bring the radio crew back one more time. Don't lean on any fireplaces. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. I hope you're having a wonderful night. And if you are out at the Roxbury, be on the lookout for the good old Zohran Mamdani's brand new tenant director, who's going to organize all of these Batman Begins witch trials, or I should say, would be Dark Knight Rises, I believe. That's one with Bane, where they do like this is just your sentencing trials, you know, the old Soviet rigged trials, kangaroo courts. Zohran Mamdani is bringing those forward for landlords, but he's assigned someone very important to do it. Her name is Sia Weaver. Now, who is Sia Weaver? She is a radical, genuine red book carrying communist who has said repeatedly and consistently, she believes the ownership of any private property, the ownership of anything, is evil, white supremacist, like the worst of the worst kind of stuff. Here, let's take it from her.
I think the reality is that for centuries, we've really treated property as an individualized good and not a collective good. And we are going to transitioning to treating it as a collective good and towards a model of shared equity will require that we think about it differently.
Wait a minute. Your tenant director, Zohran Mamdani, is someone who said we need to strip property away from private owners. Tell me, how is collective housing in any collective housing, Section 8 housing portion of the country? Show me the Section 8 housing that looks amazing because everyone like keeps it up and works on it and makes it pretty. If people do not own the thing, if they do not have skin in the game, if it is paid for them, they do not take care of said thing. This is documented, and not just documented once or twice. Every single time there is a public resource, or there is a resource that is taken, is nationalized, it is made public, as in the governing body takes ownership of it, it always goes down in quality. By the way, the same thing goes, just for the record, the number one way to improve involvement in a church is for tithing to increase. Individuals who tithe to their church, they care more about what's going on in the building. It's not just limited to government. If you have skin in the game, then you are more willing to participate. She has no idea about any of this. She just decided it's white supremacist and it's racist and it's probably homophobic.
And it will mean that families, especially white families, but some POC families who are homeowners as well,
POC, people of color,
are going to have a different relationship to property than the one that we currently have.
Amazing. I would love to remind y'all that the cleanest, nicest, prettiest homes in the United States are almost always found with first-generation Hispanic, naturalized American citizens. Those who have come to this country and have escaped from Cuba, where the private property is not allowed, like Venezuela, private property not allowed. Escaping the violence from Nicaragua or Honduras, who've came here legally and own property legally. That is some of the nicest property that I've ever seen in my life. I lived in it when I was in college. To this day, I always, without a doubt, whenever I was in Indianapolis public schools, I was on the west side of Indianapolis. There are a lot of really wonderful little Hispanic communities that are first-generation immigrant communities. And you often find with those who have escaped communism, they take really good care of the stuff that they own. Why? Because their property and their ability to own property is a God-given right. It matters to them. People who have escaped poverty and have worked for everything, they take better care of their stuff. People who have been handed everything, they don't care. And it's truly frustrating to watch what was at many times in our nation's history, well, it was our very first capital. To watch it be treated in this fashion is disgusting. No worries though. Zohran Mamdani, he's on it. He's got his eye on the ball. He's ready to go. Here's where his priorities are at this second.
What we are seeing, I had a New Yorker the other day come up to me and ask me if there was any way I could help him get World Cup tickets because he was saying that the cost that he saw for a game was $600.
By the way, Letitia James, that's on to the behind of him. So you know that New York's priorities are right in line. World Cup tickets.
Right. This is increasingly out of reach. We have made what used to be a working class game into a luxury experience. And there are too many for whom it doesn't matter where the World Cup is being played in the world. They know where they're going to watch it. It's TV. And we want to ensure that there are more experiences available to each and every New Yorker.
Oh, yeah. There we go. Oh, thank God. That's the squeaky wheel that needed the grease. Someone wants to watch the World Cup live. And so what you're going to dole out, they're taking the difference between equality and equity where the kids are standing at the fence watching over the game. They just decided to make that policy. It is though a bunch of freshman stoner philosophy students and elementary education or English major have all gathered together to run the most important financial hub for now of the United States. It's going to be incredible to watch Venezuela become a shining glistening country and New York become what Venezuela was. Congratulations to the real estate developers in every other city. A huge congrats to you. This brings us over to Iran, because speaking of hellhole garbage leadership, ruining countries and killing people, Iran. Now, there are a lot of statements by the United Nations, by the European Union today, condemning the United States for, again, arresting Nicolas Maduro. Meanwhile, not a single word has been said about the Iranian regime by the Ayatollah, by the mullahs, who are trying to slaughter civilian protesters in the streets. So one of these clips, we're not going to play on air. It's really gruesome. But I will play a clip of at least a few hours ago now. We've had this confirmed. There are several regions in Iran where officials and police are running away from the protesters. So it really, at this point, we're not really sure who's up and down. Those are police officers running away. Regime officials. A couple of gunshots. Radio crew, we got to send you out to commercial. Too much news to cut off, so we're going to continue on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Now, I got to give the Ayatollah's regime a couple of props here, because whenever a Democrat regime is, maybe that's not the right word here. Whenever a left-wing or an authoritarian regime is really down in the dumps, they're struggling. Things are really, really bad. Hyperinflation is out of control. You've lost the entire populace because people don't like watching women being abused on the street day after day by this Islamic regime. The entire economy is in shambles. So what have they now done? Right before we went on air, I'm amazed. Iran has announced a stimulus, an incredible stimulus. Check this out, guys. This is huge. This is amazing. They're going to save it. This is how they sort of quelled last time.
توضیحی بدم در راستای تعهدی که دولت داره در مسیر بهبود معیشت مردم و کاهش فشارهای اقتصادی که بر مردم وجود داره و به طور مشخص یکی از موضوعات عدالتی هست که باید در توزیع منابع.
To have this lady coming forward from the administration saying, "Hey, we're gonna move in. We're gonna supply a huge stimulus to the economy, and what we're gonna give you is a couple million of currency for everyone. Everyone gets a couple of million currency, because that always is a huge success." Now, I do have to reveal here. She's so excited. At least, the guy holding the whip behind the camera is probably a little more excited than she is. She announces that they get a couple million of this Iranian currency. It equates to $7 US. Yeah, that's right. 7 whole US dollars. Now, if I'm throwing everything away right now, and by that I mean I'm throwing caution to the wind, I am openly on camera going against the government. The protests are enormous. Seriously, I've never seen the kind of people marching in solidarity, calling directly for, openly in front of everyone, the death of al-Khamenei. Despite the gunshots, despite the violence, and the government has gotten together and announced, that's right, while you have all of these people in the middle of this, gathering to chant death to al-Khamenei. That is not a small crowd. Note to CNN, who thinks that a couple of people chanting for Maduro's release is like a huge, bulgy, amazing protest. This is what a real crowd looks like. Okay? You can't count the number of people in this image. They're out in open, no masks, no burqas, chanting publicly for the death of al-Khamenei. And the Ayatollah, the regime's response is, here's $7. I mean, that's some great foreign policy. That's some great local, domestic policy. Beautiful. So it just goes to show you, whether you're Tim Walz, whether you're Zohran Mamdani, or whether you're al-Khamenei, just, throw a couple of bucks at him, and I'm sure everything will calm right down. So that said, I do want to go back to some of the Venezuela stuff that we weren't able to cover, and this is the reaction stuff. Some of the reaction that has continued up until the show has been truly astonishing. Truly astonishing. And I say that because, again, I level with you guys. I don't have a journalism degree. I don't have a broadcasting degree. My degrees from Ball State University are in curriculum development, which was a waste of money, and education technology, which was, you guessed it, a waste of money. My science education and bio pre-med degree from Maranatha Baptist University, that's actually worth something. But I don't have a broadcasting and a journalism degree. The broadcasting journalism degree people have written some of the most truly retarded content that I have ever seen in my entire life. I've never seen anything this embarrassing. There was an article from The Atlantic that boggles the mind. Tom Nichols posted it over today. I want to get this on screen. Because the United States has arrested Maduro and gone in and toppled an insane dictatorship, this now gives, according to The Atlantic, China and Russia all of the reason they need legally to invade Taiwan or to invade Ukraine and the surrounding regions. And there are people that believe this. There are individuals out there who believe that China and Russia and Iran and all of the African and Middle Eastern and European countries, they follow international law. There is one country that follows international law despite not having to. That is usually the United States. No other country on the face of this earth diligently follows international law. Now, there are countries that are expected to follow international law. That just means the United States and any of her allies when she's acting in the United States' interests. Everyone else is allowed to do whatever they want, and it's complicated and very complex and deep and interesting. Oh, man, why is China enslaving all of these people? Oh, lots of layers of cultural history. But the United States captures Nicolas Maduro and all hell breaks loose. Oh my gosh, can't believe it. Now, China can totally invade Taiwan. First of all, if China wants a third navy at the bottom of the Taiwanese Strait, by all means, go ahead. Go right ahead. Your air defenses were alongside those with Russia's air defenses that were wiped out in 20 minutes by the United States. There were entire articles, yet again, more media articles saying the United States can't touch Venezuela because of all of these air defenses. It's incredible. Every time someone tells the United States that their air defenses are incredible, they get royally wrecked, spanked, bent over again and again and again. They get the belt. They go up against Kurt Signetti of Indiana University. It ain't pretty. Sorry, I had to say one thing about Indiana University. Come on, the Peach Bowl is this Friday. I don't know how I'm going to make it through this week. Now, the major statements since the operation that matter, not the Europors. I don't care about them. I do, however, find a couple of these responses, I should say, by individuals around the world and really in the United States truly fascinating. So, first of all, there's a Politico article that's really hilarious. So, Politico wrote this evening before the show, Venezuela operation magnifies the Pentagon's shift west and away from China. If there is anyone out there who doesn't understand, China has just lost its greatest outpost in South and Central America. They no longer have anywhere to belt and road their Belt and Road initiative in South America too, except for Brazil. And Delula is sweating big, heavy Gatorade beads of sweat. But to the United States, a couple of things that are really interesting. Even several former secretaries of state and defense, like Mike Pompeo, said that the United States' actions are just unequaled. They're incredible. Even people who traditionally are supposed to despise Donald Trump have made it very, very clear. I mean, what the president has done with the United States military and effectuating policy is staggering. Senator John Fetterman, Senator Betterman, if you will, of Pennsylvania, slapping back at Chris Murphy of Connecticut to make it very clear. Yeah, it's kind of cool when we wreck dictators. It's kind of neat.
Senator Chris Murphy, your Democratic colleague, called the operation wildly illegal. America doesn't want this war. Nobody asked for this. And I think the most important conversation to have is Venezuela is not a security threat to the United States. They're not threatening to invade us. Do you want to take this on?
I respect my friend in Connecticut, but we have different views on this and perhaps other views as well. I just said this on my social media that, remind everybody that America is a force of good, order, and democracy, and we are promoting these kinds of values.
Now, I want to make this, pretty clear for those who have flirted with this nonsense of, well, this was really unconstitutional. I can't believe the president would do this. First of all, War Powers Act 1973, read it. The Constitution also, read it. Nothing in the Constitution says that the United States cannot smack around foreign dictators. I will remind you, the oldest tradition of the United States Navy, other than stealing Britain's boats, is beating the living crap out of Islamic cities in Africa. Congress, for a long time, had nothing to do with that. The president just ordered it and it was done. I hate to break this to the boys and girls and squirrels of the era, but a lot of the military actions taken by the executive branch of the United States are not supposed to sit through the bureaucratic filth of Congress. Sorry. And by the way, that was true back when Barack Obama did it. The reason that Barack Obama, some of his strikes were wrong is because they did things that were unnecessary, or they got us further involved into conflicts for interests and reasons that were unnecessary. And through the nation-building, soft-hearted, good-handed garbage that really got too many people killed. Of course. But the idea the president of the United States isn't allowed to flex the muscle of the U.S. military is just silly. It's just silly. And when it's John Fetterman, the Democrat in Pennsylvania, with common sense like millions of common sense Americans that get this, the couple on the outside, they go, well, actually, I really don't like it when the military does anything. You're a goober nerd and you need to go touch some grass.
We are the good guys, let's pretend that now we are acting in a way. Now, remember, we all Democrats years ago wanted to eliminate him, and why have a bounty of $25 million if we didn't want him gone? Why would you do these things if you weren't willing to actually do something other than harsh language?
Now to the again, to Senator Fetterman's point, the idea right now that the United States can complete military maneuvers with the federal agencies like the Central Intelligence Agency, the FBI, the Drug Enforcement Agency, and then can coordinate this all. That was a major accomplishment in an era of everyone trying to leak everything. It seems as though a lot of those leaks have been sealed, and incredibly so. And by the way, I really cannot praise this administration enough for pulling this off flawlessly. As the administration officials told Donald Trump in the weeks leading up to the operation, if this doesn't go perfectly, there's going to be problems. Now, of course, you have the people who know the least about politics in the United States. It's currently a toss-up between basically Tucker Carlson and then like the whining menopausal women of the left. Now, the whining menopausal women of the left, we all know very, very well. You have Sunny Austin. She gets out there and goes, that's piracy, because she saw a Disney movie once. Here you go.
I can speak to the legal part of it. I think Anna can certainly speak to the geopolitics of it all, but it's not legal to do this. Tell people why not. Well, it's not legal because it violates international law.
Okay, first of all, not how international law works. Number two, the United States is not subject to any kind of international law. There is no international governing body that holds weight against the United States. That's not a thing. It's never been a thing. Woodrow Wilson tried his diggity dog damnedest with the League of Nations, and he failed.
Right? And this sort of represents this new, I've never seen it before.
We know.
The president of the United States to kill, I believe he killed over, the U.S. government killed over 100 people, including civilians and military, in Venezuela during this kidnapping and capture.
Part of some of the people that she is outlining and articulating here are citizens of like Cuba. Now, I'm going to let you in on a little bit of a secret here. The Cuban Praetorian Guard was not there for giggles and sightseeing to dance with the Chinese ambassadors. No.
And international law doesn't allow it unless unless Congress declares war, and Congress did not do that. So this country was founded on the premise of the balance of power. Right?
It was founded on the balance of power. The president operated within the current constitutional law that exists under legal precedent in the United States. Congress passed the War Powers Act. It passed it. If you don't like it, change the law. But crying that the president did something you gave him the power to do, you gave all of these congressmen the right to give up that power. Cry about it. Womp womp. Big stinky shame. I'm sorry, but when Steve Harvey looks to the survey board and checks for international law, no.
Right? So you have checks and balances. So you have co-equal powers, co-equal branches of power. So you have the judicial branch, and then you have the executive branch, which the president is a part of, and then you have, of course, the legislative branch, and that's Congress. And
thank you. AOC could really benefit from a little quick civics lesson on the three branches of government.
They're supposed to check each other. This president is doing whatever the heck he wants without any checks or balances. And I have never in my lifetime seen this type of regime change, which is what we just saw, work out.
I love that regime change has now become like the buzzword. You see this from those on the left, and also, again, the pearl clutchers in kind of the hyper-populist isolationist camp. Regime change. Oh my gosh, regime change. How could you do that? That poor Nicolas Maduro. That's not our place. After all, it says in the good book, everyone's allowed to do things but the United States. Second Opinions, Chapter 3.
Well, for the United States, it just doesn't work. And in my view, this is completely 100% illegal.
Now, that's my favorite part. That truly is my favorite part. Thanks to the Media Research Center for providing us that excellent clip. In my view, they always finish. There are hundreds of thousands of angry, grumpy, old, left-wing, menopausal women who are out on social media going, in my view, it's wrong. They can't articulate why. They have no idea how legal precedence works. They have no idea how the military works. They've never stepped foot outside of the United States. And yet they believe that deep in their heart, and according to their hate has no home here yard sign, that they know all of the super special rules, and you let that Mr. Maduro and his wife go right now, young man. It's ridiculous. Now, unfortunately, there are a few of these fools that are maybe what they would say not on the left, at least for now. One of these, of course, is Marjorie Taylor Greene, whose hobbies include huffing paint and crying sexism for no reason whatsoever. She's leaving Congress. She's quitting because she's bad at her job. So Meet the Press brought her on for the foreign policy assessment of Venezuela. And I really can't set up this clip for you any better than she does. I want you to enjoy it. Try to hold on to your IQ while you're watching it.
Why do you disagree, Congresswoman?
Well, you know, I served on the Homeland Security Committee for 3 years, and I am overwhelmingly in support of a strong border. I impeached Secretary Mayorkas. Those were my articles of impeachment that passed the House because fentanyl overdoses skyrocketed to 280% in my own district. And the majority of American fentanyl overdoses and deaths come from Mexico. Those are the Mexican cartels that are killing Americans.
Now, sweetie honey baby, do you know where the chemicals, like Mexico doesn't just have like hot water, cold water, hydrochloric acid, studied formaldehyde, like they don't have like the chemicals to make fentanyl on tap. Like, hey man, you go and put under that water is some hot water, and over there there's the precursor chemicals 1 through 7. They don't know. I'm afraid not. They come from somewhere. And yes, China does in fact ship them to both Mexico and Venezuela.
And so my pushback here is if this was really about narco-terrorists and about protecting Americans from cartels and drugs being brought into America.
Which it's not, and no one in the administration has said that's what it was all about.
The Trump administration would be attacking the Mexican cartels.
They have offered. Sheinbaum has turned them down. Don't count your chickens before they hatch. I will likely see the cartels be stricken by the end of this administration. My lips to God's ears, I know.
Now, I am not defending Maduro, and of course, I'm happy for the people of Venezuela to be liberated.
But
Americans celebrated the liberation of the Iraqi people after Saddam Hussein. They celebrated the liberation of the Libyan people after Gaddafi.
So a couple of things there. So she's gonna do the everyone that I don't like is a neocon. Everyone that, you know, there's a bit of an issue here. The people in Venezuela, on the ground in Venezuela, who do have a traditional culture that does honor things like democracy, they did in fact cheer when Maduro was killed. The people in Iraq at the fall of Saddam Hussein did not. The people in Libya at the fall of Gaddafi did not. This isn't as though they're just a couple of people in the US going, yay! That's not how this works. And she knows that, or at least I would hope she knows that, but she's lying. She's lying because she thinks that Chuck Schumer said this, so we have to stop this operation now. What operation? It's over. It's done. Show me the major Iraq operation that's currently afoot. It's not. They said the same thing about Iran. Do you remember that? Oh, we're gonna be in World War III. Russia and China are gonna come in, and I'm Tucker Carlson. They're gonna send my sons off to die. And he was retarded then. He's retarded now. It's hallucination.
And this is the same Washington playbook that we are so sick and tired of, that doesn't serve the American people, but actually serves the big corporations, the banks, and the oil executives.
Oh, it's those big stinky billionaires. Ah, yes. Bernie Sanders, the billionaires, they're trying to take on the poor people and the oil, and they grind them up in the blender. Someone get me my pudding.
And so my pushback here is on the Trump administration that campaigned on Make America Great Again, that we thought was putting America first. I want to see domestic policy be the priority that helps Americans afford life after 4 disastrous years of the Biden administration. I want to see domestic policies that prioritize jobs and affordable housing for Americans after 4 disastrous years of the Biden administration. And I want to see domestic priorities that put
what's her name? Katie, Kristen, Caitlin, whatever, on Meet the Press is growing tired of hearing her whine.
Americans first in regards of health care. Health insurance costs too much, car insurance, home insurance. And these are issues that matter to Americans. We don't consider Venezuela our neighborhood. Our neighborhood is right here in the 50 United States.
Okay, so cool fact about geography, boys and girls. There are some countries that are closer to you than others. I'm not joking. Hang on a second here. There's this really cool thing called a map, a globe, an atlas, Google Maps, if that's all you've got close to you. So you can see here, this is the United States. Kind of a cool place. I'm a big fan of it. And then right here next to us, right here, that's Venezuela. It's right here. It's right on the other side of Cuba. We have Guantanamo Bay right at the southern tip of Cuba, right there. Very close to the United States. Now, all the way over here are a bunch of countries that are not close to the United States. Now, some of our trade flows through some of these canals and regions, and we do have an interest in making sure Americans have just as much access to those trade networks as other people do. But if we're going to say that Venezuela is not within the U.S. sphere of influence, it's right bleeping here. Florida's a lot closer to Venezuela than New York is to California. And realistically, if you look at the globe, you can see Venezuela right here, Florida right here. Alaska, if you don't count the little tiny strip of it right here, is a pretty healthy distance away from Venezuela either. So, I mean, you know, pro tips for life here. Don't take geographic lessons from the goofball who's so bad at Congress, she's quitting. Why? Because no one likes her. Now, she continues on by saying that, you know, American oil companies are going into Venezuela because, for the 800th time, although Representative Thomas Massie of Kentucky doesn't understand history before 2013, the United States oil companies that had built the wells in Venezuela, that had put all of our money into the industry, and then they were stolen, they were nationalized, they were not paid for, they were stolen. Those were Americans who had jobs in those companies, those oil companies. They were stolen. As much, evil gloom and doom as the oil companies, you do realize there are like normal Americans that are working on those wells and those pipelines and transporting that oil. Just normal blue collar tradesmen, just like anywhere else. The company that you work for likely has a CEO too. Of course, again, the audience that's tuning into the show, you know this. You're very well aware of this. She's not. She makes the case that, this is, you see all of these oil companies that are going to be moving to Venezuela and they're going to be taking American jobs from Americans. No. Americans will be the ones buying the oil. Americans will be the ones transporting the oil. Americans will be the ones building and refitting the wells. They will be building and refitting the platforms. It will be Americans providing security to those platforms. American business is allowed to go where it wants. I'm sorry, I just don't care. You don't think that American companies should be allowed to go somewhere? Too freaking bad. Womp womp. Yeah, I want gas that's 50 cents a gallon. And if that means that American oil companies are in Venezuela sending oil back to the United States, boo freaking who? You know what happens when gas is 50 cents a gallon because we are having oil come into the United States? And we're also developing our own alongside it. It's not an either or. You have new jobs that are created and then prices go down on transportation, which brings down the price of goods. And oh my gosh, I think I just figured out why the Dow and the rest of the stock market was doing backflips in excitement today. It also makes South America safer and Central America because China and Russia no longer have an outpost there. Incredible, amazing, wow. Now, the Trump administration followed up by saying that he wants Greenland and he wants that Cuba might fall. I do talk to this a little bit with Andreas a little bit later. We'll get that YouTube interview uploaded here right after the show's over. And then, of course, he's talked about a couple of other places. Should the United States own Greenland? Yes. Why? Because we protected it when Denmark fell in the Second World War. They lost it. We defend it. We have troops on the ground in Greenland. We prop up that entire island. We explored more of it than the Danish did. This idea that just because Denmark stuck a flag in the place, that means they get the entire island, that only works if you can back it up. Now, the reason I'm telling you this, the reason this is funny to me, is that some guy calling himself, I don't know what positions are over in Norway, some Norwegian who fancies himself to be a big cheese. And I have no idea what a Norwegian accent is, but his name is Jonas Gahr Store. He is the Statsminister og leder av Arbeiderpartiet, the prime minister and leader of the Norwegian Labour Party. Oh, so he's a Norwegian leftist. Incredible. He tweeted out, Greenland is an integral part of the Kingdom of Denmark. It isn't. Norway stands in full solidarity with the Kingdom of Denmark. Okay, then put troops there. Or shut up. If the United States pulled out of Greenland, the Chinese and the Russians would be on that island and just claim territory within about 15 minutes. Yes, the United States should own Greenland. Yeah, you know why? Because we can. You want to know what international law is? It's the United States. It's the United States. All of these other countries, so the same way here locally, that a lot of us have come to the point that guys like Governor Tim Walz have screwed up so much. You know what? No, you no longer get to do the things. Guess what? You can do the same thing on the international stage. You don't have to look at some pissant garbage country who can't do anything right and doesn't have the troops to back it up, and they tell you how to live your life. You know what? No, Americans can use it. It should be American land. Manifest destiny. Piss off. That's the legacy of the Spanish-American War. It was not just the main for why we said to hell with Spain. And yeah, we should take Panama. Yes, absolutely we should. And you know what? Also, we should probably own the Philippines. And no, they don't have to be full territories with voting privileges. They can just be United States territories. Why? Because we say so. And you know what? If we don't say so, then Congress acts, or you, the American people, elect a president not to go after those territories. Believe it or not, for about 110 years in this country, that was the primary campaign on which presidents and congressional officials ran. I will support the United States taking this. I will not support the United States not taking this. When Nicholas Trist went down on behalf of James K. Polk to negotiate the end of the Mexican-American War, he didn't follow orders. The American people voted and encouraged and wrote to their congressman, we still have the letters, that wanted the United States to take all of Sonora, all of Chihuahua, all of Tabasco, all the way down to Tampico. They wanted more territory because they won the war. And Trist brokered a little weeny tiny line that's close to what we have today outside of the remainder of the Gadsden Purchase. And then that was it. And then a small Rio Grande River adjustment in the 80s, but really small, not important. It's a part of American history. Well, other countries are allowed to have histories. Somalian culture, they're allowed to have history and culture. The English are, well, they used to be allowed to have culture. People from India, they're allowed to have, what, the United States can't manifest a little destiny anymore? I'm sorry, it's the 250th year of this country. God bless this country. I do not care about the whining goobers. Tony, why did we pull out of the Philippines? Two reasons, my dear Roselle. Number one, because the Soviets came in and said, if you don't turn over all of your possessions, you're very bad. And so the United States said sure, for some reason, even though the Soviets kept everything that they ever had. The reason before the deal with the Philippines was once they had reached a level of self-governance, we would still protect them, but they would run their own. They started getting a very large influx of Islamic people. There's a really fascinating thing regarding the World War I as to why the United States didn't declare war on the Ottoman Empire. And it was in part because we didn't want an Islamic uprising in the Philippines. The what should be the state of MacArthur. I do believe in a lot of ways. That's just, again, if I have a wish list of territory I believe the United States should own, that would be one of them. I do love, at the end of the day, why I'm going through all of this. The United States has just as much right and authority to broker harsh terms of negotiation as other countries do. The President of the United States understands this. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, treats the economy and treats alliances with the same brokerage tactics that other nations use diplomatic capital, and the same way that the American people have traditionally used their military. And other nations don't know how to respond to that. Because when you couple the United States' power economically, diplomatically, militarily, industrially, and socially, it outnumbers the rest of the world. It does. And so if the United States wants to broker some harsh deals to benefit Americans, good. Good. Because right now I'm watching all of the countries that didn't, the Australians, the English, the French, the Danish, the Swedish, and on she goes, the South Africans. I've seen them all turn over their countries for warm feelings and hugs. Well, now they're experiencing all of the joys of the third world. No. And with that, I wish you a very fond Monday evening. We'll be back tomorrow with more. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated, first on 93 WIBC. Take care.